Recording in progress.
Good evening, Springfield. Welcome to the Township Planning Board meeting of November 15th, 2021. Adequate notice has been given in accordance with the Sunshine Laws. Notice was published on October 28th, 2021 in the local source, which is the official newspaper of the Township of Springfield for 2021 and posted in the Annex building on October 29th, 2021. Before we begin, I just want to make sure that we brought in our member, Mr. Schwartz. Apu, if you can work on making sure we bring in Mr. Schwartz. Okay, can we have a pledge to allegiance to the flag, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag,
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Perfect. Thank you, Apu. Ms. Law, can we have a quick roll call?
Yep. Mayor Chris Waiver.
Here.
Committeeman Rich Huber. Absent. Mr. David Barnett.
Here.
Mr. Andrew Schwartz.
Yes, I made it.
Awesome. Thank you. Mr. Aaron Lawfer.
Here.
Mr. Brian Brendel. Absent. Ms. Marissa Ruggiero is absent. Mr. Thomas Lopes.
Here.
Mr. Scott Wishna.
Here.
Vice Chair Kessel.
Here.
And Chairman Tiger.
I'm here.
There we have a quorum.
All right, perfect. Everyone here. Okay, so the first thing we have to deal with is we have a resolution that we approved back 2 months ago. It's application 6-2021 SRDH ACH LLC. That's 173 Mountain Avenue, block 802, lot 11. This was for a preliminary and final site plan for a generator. I believe that it was on the Google Drive. I didn't see any issues with it. Any concerns by any members of the board? Seeing none,
Nope.
can we entertain a motion to approve resolution?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the resolution as stated by yourself.
Second.
Can I have a quick roll call?
Mr. Barnett.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kessel.
Yes.
Mayor Weber.
Mayor Weber, off mute.
Have a technical, yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schwartz.
Yes.
Mr. Lawfer.
Yes.
Mr. Lopes.
Yes.
And Mr. Wishna.
I abstain. I don't remember this application, so I think I
Okay.
might have missed a meeting.
Okay, that's
Thank
fair
you.
enough. Okay,
Motion
perfect. Going a little bit out of order, it's that time of year. It's November. We're past election time, and we're towards the end of the year, and we review RFPs. Our board secretary already put in a request out in the public for RFPs for planning board attorney, planning board engineer, and planning board planner. Jen doesn't have to worry. We don't do planning board secretary, so she's safe. So with that said, I always like to form a subcommittee. That subcommittee is charged with responsibilities of reviewing the RFPs and coming back to the board on January 2nd or January 3rd, whenever our January meeting is, letting us know that they reviewed them, give the board recommendations. Obviously, the board doesn't have to take the recommendations. They can review it themselves and go into the annex or ask for a copy of it. But for now, I figured the subcommittee, if no one has any problems, I'd like Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Barnett, Mr. Loeffler, and Ms. Kessel to be the four folks that will review this and report back to the board. If one of the folks cannot make the meetings that they pick to review, then I will fill in for that one person. Any problem from the board? Any issues?
Not with me.
Okay, well, seeing none, then we'll move forward. The first application we have is a waiver of site plan. This is T-Mobile Northeast, 200 Mountain Ave, block 1202, lot 35. This is for site plan waiver for a cell phone tower. Apu, if you can bring in the attorney, but from the board's understanding, we've done this many of times. If they meet certain state statutes, the board will grant a site plan waiver that they don't have to come to us. Go ahead, Apu, if you can bring them in, and Glenn will ask them a few questions, and Mr. Disco will agree that it meets the state standards, and we will be able to open up the board for any questions.
Apu,
Yes.
it's Frank Ferraro.
Yes, hi, hello, everyone. Frank Ferraro, attorney on behalf of the applicant T-Mobile Northeast LLC. Mr. Chairman, as you stated, site plan waiver application. The board's actually heard many with respect to this particular property at 200 Mountain Avenue. T-Mobile has 10 antennas up on the tower right now at a center line height of 150 feet. The tower is existing at 158.5 feet. In this application, T-Mobile is looking to swap out 3 existing antennas on existing mounts with 3 new antennas. Those 3 new antennas will actually be shorter than the ones they replace. And there's an existing equipment cabinet on the ground, and T-Mobile is looking to add 2 additional equipment cabinets next to it within their existing lease area for a total of 3 in order to upgrade the facility and provide improved service to this area of the township. As outlined in our submission, we do believe we meet the requirements of an eligible facility request under 47 USCA 1455, and that none of the proposed upgrades will have a substantial change to the existing facility. We do have our engineer, Anthony Cristiano from French and Perillo, with us if the board has any questions of him. But we did submit a structural analysis indicating that the tower can support the upgrade. And we also have a signed and sealed letter from French and Perillo Associates, the project engineer, confirming in their professional opinion as engineers that the facility will not exceed any of the thresholds for a substantial change to the proposed facility. And it's their opinion that the board could comfortably grant the requested site plan waiver.
One second before you go forward. Mr. Brendel joined at the beginning of your speech. Am I correct, Mr. Brendel?
Yes, sorry, I'm late. I had trouble getting the link. I apologize.
Okay, so good. I just, for the record, Mr. Brendel joined. Okay,
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. So, Counselor, I believe that's fine. Mr. Disco, do you agree with everything that it meets the state statute and everything is within our code?
Yes, everything that Mr. Ferraro just talked about. It's very, very common. All the carriers, as technology increases, they swap them out. That's what we're doing here. Allocation standards are very clear. He's working within his confines of the equipment field. It's located behind the fire house, so this is not private property. It's really our property. This is very standard. We get about 1 or 2 of these a year, I think, and this should be a waiver.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Keynes, anything to add from the legal side?
No, sir.
Okay, well then, with that, then I'm going to open up to the board. I'm going to see if there's any questions. Mayor Weber?
No questions.
Mr. Schwartz?
I would just point out, if I'm not mistaken, that there's an error on the site plan referring to Tucker Avenue instead of Tucker Avenue.
Well, I think
just for accuracy's sake, so we know where this is actually going.
That's perfect. So, Counselor, we're going to make sure that's incorporated and that needs to be changed prior to any of the work being done.
So it should be Tucker Avenue, correct?
Tucker.
Tucker, Tooker.
You have it right on the cover page, but not on the site plan.
Gotcha. We will correct that for sure.
This is why we have Andrew on the board. He looks through that. Great.
I get paid well for it, too.
Yes. Mr. Barnett?
No issues. It's very straightforward.
Mr. Brendel?
No issues. We've done a few of these.
Yes. Mr. Loeffler?
No questions.
Mr. Lopes?
No comments.
Mr. Wishna?
No questions.
Mrs. Kessel?
No questions.
All right, and I have no questions. Okay, well then, with that, I see no issues with this. Can I entertain a motion to approve the site plan?
As soon as we make sure there's no public with their hands up, Mr. Chairman.
That's correct. You're right. Okay, let me take this opportunity to open up this matter to anyone in the public that wish to comment on application site plan waiver for site phone cell tower, block 1202, lot 35. Apu, is there anyone that's raising their hand?
Seeing none.
Perfect. Well, seeing none, I'm going to close this matter to the public and remand it back to the board for a vote. I think the only condition of approval that would be obviously is that site plan gets updated with the correct street name.
And Mr. Chairman,
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Frank Ferraro, could we also, as part of our relief, request a waiver of resolution?
Yes, that's fine. We would do that at the same time. It's fine. So can I obtain motion to
Mr.
approve?
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve site plan waiver for T-Mobile Northeast 200 Mountain Avenue, Block 1202, Lot 35 for a cell tower.
Second.
With also waiving.
With waived and the correction of the street name.
And I still second it.
Okay, can we have a roll
Thank you,
call?
Sharon.
Mr. Barnett,
Yes to approve.
Vice Chair Kessel,
Yes.
Mayor Weber,
Yes.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes.
Mr. Lawfer,
Yes.
Mr. Brendel,
Yes.
Mr. Lopes,
Yes.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
and Chairman Tiger.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Perfect. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Perfect. The next one is our last thing. It's a Blacks Lane Church Mall redevelopment plan, block 208. And I'm only going to read this once because even later on, I'm going to refer back to my prior thing. Block 208, lot 6, 7, 8, 9, block 209, lot 101, 101.01, 456 Academy Green right of way, a portion of Blacks Lane right of way. This is for the board's edification. This is a site plan that that was deemed, we the board back in earlier this year deemed this an area of need, these specific lot and blocks. We determined that it met certain state conditions in order to be deemed an area of need of redevelopment. Since that designation, the governing body, the township planner, and so forth have worked very closely and very feverishly to develop a plan and ordinances for that specific site. The planning board subcommittee, Mrs. Kessel, Mr. Barnett, Mr. Schwartz, and I had an opportunity a few weeks ago to review this a little bit more in depth with the township planner. We had the ability to really work through and spend some comments. I will tell you that that the subcommittee was overall very impressed with what was done. It actually is a very, very nice plan. We had 3 issues that we pointed out. It's actually the same issues that Mr. Disco had in his letter. I'll outline them real quick. What the board is here to do is just to basically, we're not here to say we don't like what the building looks like, the color of the building, or anything like that. We're here to determine whether it meets the definition of the master plan of what we're trying to do. So all the other stuff will be there for site plan approval. Anything that comes up, street signs, naming, whatever it might be, those are all things that this board will hear sometime in the future, maybe March, April, May, June, whenever they get their full plan together. But for now, we're going to hear the overall zone for the area and comment on what are any questions and concerns. The 3 areas that the subcommittee brought up was, first thing was there's some parking that is on site that was on the street parking that the subcommittee felt that we should bank that parking, approve it, but leave it there as in the bank, that in the future, the owner and applicant can come to the TRC and get approval on that. I think that was issue 1. Issue 2, the traffic light at Morris and Church Mall has a very short time. I think it's 6-7 seconds. We'll hear from the planner on that. That is one area that would absolutely need to be addressed to be able to handle the volume out there. The third issue is Blacks Lane alongside CVS. The subcommittee felt that we should review it for potentially widening that area, and Mr. Disco reviewed that and came back with some feedback in the planner. So, Mr. Mistretta, are you there? Can we bring him in?
He's joining now.
Perfect. And for the board to be aware, we have obviously Matt Jessup on. Matt is the township redevelopment attorney. He's been before us many, many times. We asked him to join just in case he has the board has any questions that him and Glenn can work through. But at the end of tonight, the goal is, if we're in agreement, is to adopt a resolution that we believe this to be consistent with the master plan, and any other comments that we have to go to the governing body to review for their next meeting when they decide to hear it. So, Mr. Mistretta, if you can please take over the meeting and give us a brief overview of the project.
Sure, thank you. My name's Michael Mistretta. I'm the Township Planner, work for Harbor Consultants. Our office is in Cranford, New Jersey. If I can share the screen, I have a very quick PowerPoint that I could walk through, and it basically summarizes the highlights, if you will, of the redevelopment plan. Okay. It is coming up. And can everybody see this, my screen? Yeah. And can you see the beginning of the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, great. Let me just go slideshow from the beginning. Okay. I'm here tonight to present the redevelopment, Blacks Lane and Church Mall redevelopment plan. It's dated October 2021, and it's been on file with both the Township Committee and with the Planning Board. The first slide I have shows the downtown Springfield redevelopment. And the important part of this slide is what we're trying to show here is the assemblage of the properties over the years. In this slide, you'll see a light green hatching. These are the properties that were previously satisfied the area of need of redevelopment in 2006. Then you'll see another property that was added in 2014. That's a yellow property, lot 6, block 9. It's a little hard to see right above the CVS. And then more recently, the 2020 to 2021 redevelopment study captured the properties that are highlighted in a purple hatching. So the important part is over the years, the redevelopment of these properties were anticipated and planned for and discussed by our planning board and our town committee as far back as 2006. And over the years, they've assembled a larger group of properties to redevelop as one project. The next slide shows those same properties broken down into a table, the same table that you have in your redevelopment plan. There are 8 properties, which are approximately 4.4 acres, and there's 2 right-of-ways, Academy Green right-of-way and a portion of the Blacks Lane right-of-way. Altogether, the 8 properties and the 2 right-of-ways consist of approximately 4.9 acres. These are the same properties. Now I just focused in on those 8 properties and the 2 right-of-ways, and this is how they lie today. And you'll see recently, as this planning board is aware, there was a subdivision of the cemetery that created block 209, lot 1.01, and block 209, 1.02. So that's a recent subdivision that's now reflected on this exhibit. So these are the properties that we're talking about tonight, these 8 properties and 2 right-of-ways. What this redevelopment plan does is it takes those 8 properties and 2 right-of-ways and it reconfigures them. And it reconfigures them into 4 lots. For the purpose of this redevelopment plan, we've identified them as lot A, B, C, and D. Obviously, they'll be renumbered as the project process moves forward in front of the site plan. Lot A is shaded in blue. That is substantially that is the new building that we're going to propose, the 100-unit building. Lot B is the existing Spring Mill Manor building and the surrounding green space that wraps around the cemetery property. Lot C is a surface parking lot, separate lot and block that will be opposite the relocated Academy Green right away. And then in purple on this map is the cemetery lot, lot 1.01. So this represents the new configuration of the 4 properties and the new proposed right-of-way extending from Blacks Lane over to Church Mall. The redevelopment plan breaks down the project into 4, it breaks down the project into those 4 lots. Proposed lot A is the 100-unit inclusionary residential development. It's an inclusionary project, so there's 15% of those units or 15 are designated affordable housing units, and they're spread throughout that building. Lot B is the existing 40-unit Spring Mill Manor age-restricted project. Lot C is the surface parking lot, and Lot D, again, is the cemetery property. Each of those 4 lots in the redevelopment plan has their own separate bulk standards. Lot A, within those 100 units, there's 25 one-bedroom units. There's 60 two-bedroom market rate units. Those are the 85 market rates. Again, there's 15 affordable housing units that are dispersed throughout the project. Key items of this project are the architectural building elevations represent a typical design and use of building materials for all elevations in that project. It includes a subterranean wrapped parking garage, which is also constructed with the same building materials as the main portion of the building. And there's a 7,000 square foot outdoor amenity deck. On Lot B, the Spring Mill Manor building, the existing 40-unit age-restricted building, we are proposing exterior facade improvements. The building has aged over time, and the developer is proposing to upgrade those exterior improvements. We're also going to reconstruct the surface parking, reconfigure it, and redo the driveway circulation on that property in a shared approach that's going to service the other building, the market rate building also. And the main idea of this reconfiguration is to create a campus setting with shared amenities. There's a pool, patio, playground, walking paths, and shared parking now that connects all of these properties. Again, the 19-space surface parking lot stands on its own on Lot C. I'll show you that in a minute. And then the cemetery, recently this planning board adopted a minor subdivision application. That application is wrapped within this redevelopment plan. It's referenced the planning board approval, the resolution, and all of the conditions thereof, including the future maintenance agreement, making sure that the cemetery is well maintained. We also have stipulations regarding the construction methods and the supervision of the work around the borders of the cemetery in order to maintain the integrity of that cemetery, both during and after construction. This is a rendered concept plan, working left to right, Church Mall, and then the first parcel, the first building, the shaded building is the 100-unit L-shaped market rate building. You can see it wraps the cemetery parcel on two sides. Below, south of the L-shaped market rate building is the relocated Academy Green right-of-way. And then we get into that isolated parking lot on parcel C, just south of that. And then you'll see a relocated driveway, entranceway, and parking lot that services the existing Spring Mill Manor building. There are no interior improvements whatsoever to the Spring Mill Manor building. It's all exterior facade treatments and reconfiguration of the parking, circulation, and driveway. And then wrapping to the rear of the cemetery, you'll see the shared amenities, which include some walking paths, open space, children playground area, an in-ground swimming pool, and a patio area. Quickly, the project summary I've already spoken to. There's 100 units in the new building with 200 parking spaces. This is the one facade that is along Church Mall. As you drive into the site from Church Mall, you'll notice the main entrance to the new 100-unit building is right at the intersection of Church Mall and the new Academy Green right-of-way. And I think it's a pretty significant and dramatic and beautiful entryway. Pickup drop-off area provided on both sides of the entryway. And you'll see along the cars that are parked in front of the building along Church Mall, there's spaces there that are provided for either guest or for cemetery use. There's restrictions that would limit overnight parking so that it doesn't become an overcrowded condition on Church Mall.
So let me, Mr. Mishra, the police would still have Title 39 as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir. The next elevation is, I take it from the corner that we were just at, and we go all the way down to Black's Lane. This is the other long elevation. And you'll see, I spoke of this separated Lot C, the surface parking lot. That's the parking lot as you approach. And then there's Academy Green and then the front of the building. If you were to envision driving up one-way Black's Lane and were to go straight, you would literally drive right into the entryway of the building. That is the subterranean parking garage entrance with the curved area that extends right off the driveway. And that's the underground parking. I'll get to that in a minute, but it just gives you another perspective of the detail of the architectural design and use of different building materials. And again, it's a requirement of the redevelopment plan that these building materials and this design is consistent around all elevations of this new building. So we only show you two here, but it's consistent throughout the building. Quickly, the other, we provide additional elevations in the redevelopment plan just to give people the feel of the change in slope across the project. This is the same, the top elevation is the same elevation that I just showed you, but we wanted to just point out how the slope changes so much across the front of the building from the main entryway down to the driveway entrance off of Black's Lane. This east side elevation is, we thought it was important to show an elevation of what the residents of the Spring Mill Manor development will be looking at. They're going to be, in my opinion, going to be looking at a very dramatic and a beautiful building facade. This is new to them because the way that the new configuration is, which I can show you again in a minute. But this is what the residents, when they see the elevation of the building, what the residents of the existing Spring Mill Manor will be looking at. And lastly, there's an elevation that depicts, again, this driveway entry. And we're just trying to provide additional detail of the architectural elements that are included at each of the corners of the building so that we could provide some nice architectural design on the corner elements of the project. As I said before, it's a subterranean garage. You drive under the building as you come in off of Black's Lane. This is a section you can see in the bottom right of the plan, right to the left of where it says A6, where the section was taken from. It's essentially in the middle of the Academy Green right away. And it just gives you an idea of when you're up on Academy Green, you can see that it's no more than a two to three story building in most places. And I love how the architect built the units within the roof of, put the apartments within the roof of the building. And it takes away from the massive feel of the building and while you use that roof structure to support units. So you have 3 levels in the front, and in the back you have 4 levels. It opens up more, and it's all done above this parking garage. And we make use of the parking garage by providing this outdoor amenity deck, which is approximately 7,000 square feet for the use of the residents. This is the underground configuration of the parking garage. Not too much to show here, except for that it's 174 parking spaces. I will note that the trash, all of the trash, bulk storage and recycling is located inside the building in the parking garage on the right-hand side of the drawing. It's hard to see in your drawing, but if you see the number 6 right above that, there's a entranceway where all of the trash, recycling, and bulk waste will be loaded and unloaded into a driveway as needed. I then move on to Springbone Manor building. This was a recent photo taken by one of the planners in my office. Gives you an idea of the condition of the building. And the whole thought behind bringing the Springbone Manor building into this project was, we wanted to make one campus overall feel of a campus feel of the overall development. And we have this brand new beautiful building, and we're studying this building and seeing that it just aged and it needed some help to bring it up to speed. So the second slide I have for you on Springfield Manor shows you an architect's rendering of the exterior improvements. We did have to take away some of the landscaping and trees from from this elevation so you could actually see the improvements, but there's a number of dormers, architectural elements, balconies, planter boxes. There's a nice entryway that's being reconstructed, the addition of shutters. We feel all the way across the entire front of the building. And what we're trying to do is we want this building to complement the new building, and it was aging. So we think those are really exciting facade improvements. And you can see the existing parking, circulation, driveway are all going to be reconfigured and brand new also. Summary of the parking. Summary of the parking. There's 176 underground parking spaces on Lot A. That's the new market rate building. We have 19 parking spaces on a separate lot on Lot C. We have these 8 banked parking spaces on Church Mall. Again, they're there. It's designed. They're not going to be constructed. It's our recommendation that the full cartway is constructed, but they're not. We don't incorporate them unless we need it at a future date. They're going to reconfigure existing parking spaces on Springfield Manor, and they have their own 38 covered parking spaces within their own building. The redevelopment plan requires streetscape improvements along Church Mall and Blacks Lane. It also requires a traffic study, which will evaluate and provide recommendations for pedestrian and vehicular improvements along the entire length of Blacks Lane and the improvements to the intersection of Church Mall and Morris Avenue, including but not limited to the addition of a second lane on Church Mall and the modification of the timing of the traffic light signals. Some of the planning board comments that we received when we had our pre-hearing were, again, the traffic improvements at Morris Avenue. There's discussion about the possibility for a second lane or just the timing of the lights. That was incorporated, and you'll see the reference section. Township traffic consultants working with the planning board traffic consultants so that they can review these studies and make sure that the town receives all the traffic improvements that we need for this job to be successful. The project is to be constructed consistent with the architectural drawing exhibits. That's a specific requirement of the redevelopment plan. So the elevations that I showed you, as well as all elevations of the building, not just the front and the side. There's a recommendation to evaluate the potential road widening of Blacks Lane. We make reference to the future maintenance of the cemetery, the planning board approval, and the agreement. That was a condition of that resolution. And then if it all fails, it's going to be the responsibility as a backstop, the responsibility of the redeveloper to continue that maintenance. And again, we spoke about the banking of the parking spaces. And that's my presentation.
Well, I think that was, like I told you when we had it through subcommittee, the building looks like Disney, like the Grand Floridian when I used to go. Now, from a standpoint, I'm going to take a quick pause, go over to Mr. Disco. Mr. Disco, can you give us some comments and address some of the concerns that you had, which I think were addressed?
Yeah, they weren't necessarily my concerns. I think they were the concerns of the ordinance subcommittee, the 3 points, and Mr. Mistretta hit on them all in his project summary there, planning board comments. So essentially the traffic study, much like we commented on the Larkin redevelopment and the now I'll call it defunct Veal redevelopment, which didn't come to pass and is engulfed by this. There has to be some analysis done of the traffic signal. Timing is very short. There is plenty of cartway width to add in separate turning lanes, so you can get 2 lanes rather than 1. I think the problem always will be how the DOT will review this and whether they look at a timing provision as an opportunity to look at the whole lot. But the opportunity is there. The bank parking was an excellent suggestion that the subcommittee made along Academy Green. It would do a number of things. It would unclutter the front or the Academy Green view of the building. It would allow for greater openness for all vehicles on two-way traffic there. And the placement of the parking will be there. They just won't be theoretically striped until as necessary or as required based upon future conditions. The Black's Lane, I tried to steal my semi-review of that comment exactly from a 2017 Veal report comment, which was you currently have a right-of-way there that's a minimum of 30 feet, very narrow, a cartway width of about 18 feet on average, which is certainly acceptable for one-way traffic without parking. But if there was a desire to create a two-way traffic pattern there, obviously there would have to be some physical changes made to the cartway, the walkway on the one side, the slope embankment along the CVS, if that's desired. Mr. Councilman Huber, I think has brought this up in the past, and there would be some difficulty in making it a two-way in the sense that you will now have potential conflicts of left turns coming out of Black's Lane on Morris Avenue, which may on paper seem like a great idea, but for peak traffic times is really going to be a headache. And it's probably why most of the traffic was directed to the traffic signal at Church Mall to begin with. So right now, the one-way pattern in on Black's Lane works very effectively for the area and probably can continue to, but certainly if the traffic study deems that we need to re-look at that or refocus energies on that, that's what that comment was there to address. And I think Mr. Mistretta incorporated that into the redevelopment plan. I think all of the subcommittee members are aware of it. And certainly now all planning board members are aware of it, so that as we morph into the future site plan review phase, we're all going to be cognizant of what the opportunity there is, but also what the challenges are there. So I think those are 3 points.
So Mr. Disco, so it would be safe to say that, we can, when the board hires a traffic expert, as well as I'm looking at the light, we would also have them look at the road cart width way to make sure that we don't have an issue.
That's correct.
Perfect. Okay. Anything else, Mr. Disco, before we go to Mr. Hughes?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Hughes, are you there? Keenan?
I'm here, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect. So you sent us a good letter, which we had a chance to review. I never even thought about electric vehicles. I mean, it's the way of the future. All we hear about is Tesla and all these electric vehicles. But can you talk a little bit about what you're recommending we incorporate? And, I know you said that the board has jurisdiction, which is great. I should have said that in the beginning, but give us a little bit of a quick overview.
Yeah, just very briefly, Mr. Chairman. So there's really basically two findings that the board is asked to make in doing this review of a redevelopment plan. One is to identify any inconsistencies with the master plan. And just on that point, looking back at the existing master plan documentation, I mean, this area has been targeted for redevelopment since the late 1990s at least. And that's been reinforced in some of the more recent master plan documents, including in 2017 with reference to pushing for inclusionary residential development in this area. So in that sense, this redevelopment plan is very consistent with those longstanding master plan goals and objectives. So our office did not identify any inconsistencies in terms of the master plan. As for our other comments, we have certainly a lot of overlap with what Mr. Disco just described to the board. The only other substantive issue, as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, is this new legislation for electric vehicle charging spaces. So this is a new state law that imposes certain requirements on projects that come before the board for site plan approval. And so that would be applicable to this particular project. I know the draft redevelopment plan currently has its own standards in place, but I think it's my understanding that the state law will control whether or not it's actually recited in the redevelopment plan itself. So that's something that the board can consider. And like I said, it doesn't have any material impact because no matter what, the state law is the sort of the controlling regulation here. But it's something that we're going to see a lot more in the future with other site plan applications. So that would be all.
Okay, I think that's a reasonable thing that we can add to the resolution if the board, the board acts favorably that, puts it as a condition that we think that the governing body should look at when they incorporate it into the redevelopment plan. So with that, seeing any other things, Glenn, before I open up the board, do you have anything for the board?
The answer is no. I think Matt's on the phone too. I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure whether, and Matt, this is a question for you, but I'm not sure that we actually have to, I think we have to be aware of changes as Keenan is suggesting, but this would be a condition of any approval that the board would grant at the site plan time. So I'm not even so sure this rises up to a consistency determination or something that needs an amendment. And I just throw that out to you. And that was part of the conversation you and I had this afternoon. So other than that, I really have no problem. I think everything is consistent, but we also have redevelopment counsel on the phone. And we ought to at least give him a chance to say, yeah, Glenn, you're okay, or not so much.
No. Mr. Jessup?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Chairman, how we all doing? So I think from my perspective, and Keenan did a great job of summarizing, right, the task here is twofold. One, to determine whether or not the redevelopment plan is consistent with the master plan. And Keenan certainly said it was, that there were no inconsistencies and that it's consistent with the master plan. And two is for the planning board to provide any recommended changes to the redevelopment plan that they reviewed tonight, that you all reviewed tonight. So if the planning board wants to add as a recommendation to the governing body that the redevelopment plan be revised to reflect the new state law with respect to EV charging, I think that's fine. I think that's appropriate. We could add that to the Exhibit B to your resolution. At the same time, as Keenan said, if you choose not to, you're not adversely impacting the project at all because that law applies whether it's in the redevelopment plan or not. So the requirements of that law with respect to installing EV infrastructure and then eventually EV charging over a period of time, the project's going to have to comply with that, whether the redevelopment plan reflects it or not. So it's fine either way. It's appropriate as a recommendation. If you choose to make it, we can add it to the exhibit. But you're not alleviating the requirement from the project if we don't include it in the redevelopment plan. Perfect.
Okay, so I'm gonna thank you, Mr. Jessup. So I'm gonna open up to the board. I'll call on everyone individually, but I think the summary was, the bank parking is already in there. That we're gonna go to do a traffic study on this, but the board is only determining whether this is consistent with the master plan, not whether the look of the building or the colors or anything like that. Even though it is very, to me, it seems very nice, but just to determine whether it's consistent with the master plan based upon what our professionals have said and our attorneys have given us some advice. So I'll go first to Mr. Barnett.
Hello. So thank you. Look, I think this is a great plan. I think the applicant did a wonderful job. I think it's consistent. One of the more exciting projects I think that we've worked on, and I'm very happy if the rest of the board wants to incorporate the EV language. Might as well, but otherwise, in my opinion, this thing's really great.
Perfect. Ms. Kessel?
I echo Mr. Barnett's sentiments exactly, and I don't have any additional comments. I do think it's a great plan.
Thank you, Ms. Kessel. Mr. Schwartz?
Yeah, two things. One, I want to go a step further than Mr. Barnett. I think it's important that our board move to include the EV standards. I think that's something that the town should be seen as being proactive with, and it's not something we should merely wait until they come back with a site plan to address. Let it be in the recommendation on the adoption for the master plan up front. And then for Mr. Mistretta, I'm not sure it's necessarily relevant to tonight's discussion, but since it dawned on me now, I figured I'd throw it out there. I noticed on the plans tonight, which I don't think I noticed when we went through them in the subcommittee, that the pool is in the back corner between with the cemetery sort of between the pool and the building. Is that going to be, is there a plan in place to make sure that the cemetery does not become a pass-through to get from the building to the pool and vice versa?
It's a very good question. Yes, there's discussion, and again, this leads to a site plan comment that would generally, when the application does come in front of this board for site plan approval, we started discussing with the developer about putting up a new fence around the cemetery, around the perimeter of the cemetery, to ensure that that does not happen. So it remains, respected. So that offense could, is a typical site plan issue that should be addressed. But the location of the walking path, the exact location of the pool, patio, children's playground area, again, are only conceptually shown on this plan. This board will get into that during the site plan application, the fine tuning of the location and the need for fencing, signage, and those type of items.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. If we can, address it now and put it on someone's radar, it's one less thing we have to address on the back end.
Very good.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Mayor Weber, you have been on the governing body. If you have any comments, or you can give us some of the thoughts what the governing body is on this.
Well, we're very pleased with the way it came out. John, you're on my screen there. There you are, John. John, Mike, our folks, we're extremely happy with what's going on. We are concerned. All of your comments and everything on it were right on the money. I'm going to suggest that we all take a look at Black's Lane. The one-way makes sense. The two-way does not. The widening of Black's is the only thing I have. I don't have anything else.
All right, so maybe we put a special look at that, that consideration, additional recommendation. It's up to the governing body if they choose to want to look at that, but we'll see what the board has to say. Mr. Loeffler?
Okay, I have a question, but being a newer member here, this may have been addressed at an earlier time when I wasn't a member, but with all the latest things going on with weather and climate, has there been thought given to how this will affect flooding and the water retention in this area?
Yes, Mr. Mistretta, the planner, can talk to that, but through site plan, they will have to make sure that the runoff equals out to net state standards to be able to make sure that there is no flooding in that area, but that it's not increasing the flooding in that area. Mr. Disco, do you want to address that real quick?
I think there is reference on the plans or in the thing to the stormwater management, but certainly they would have to provide reports, analyses to that. It's already been discussed preliminarily with their engineering firm. If it's a major development, you actually have to have reductions in the maximum flow rates for various frequencies, 100-year, 50-year, 20-year, that type of thing. So I think you're going to probably wind up with a reduction in offsite runoff. The properties as currently proposed are not shown on a flood hazard map, so they're outside of the flood hazard area. That will certainly be incorporated in any site plan submission and site plan review. So I think all of your concerns would be addressed going forward.
Yeah, I don't think that's, Mr. Loeffler, that is a great concern. It wouldn't necessarily go in our resolution now because that is purely site plan that Mike it will be in a letter to us that it would have to be a reduction of flows to make sure there's no flooding back there. But
okay,
Mr. Chairman, if I may add, when I presented this project earlier on to the mayor and the town committee, the same comment was raised. We brought it up to the engineers for the project. They went out and did geotechnical testing to figure out where the water table elevation was out there to ensure that when you construct the subterranean parking, it does not go into the water table. So they did do some preliminary analysis of the water table and were respectful of that elevation.
Okay, good.
And I would point out that that's very important because I'll call it the first redevelopment project we had, the Gomes. A plan was developed which then had to be revised based upon flood hazard area requirements. So they've anticipated that here to avoid that same issue so that we don't have to go through this process with a revised plan and in effect regress from what the decisions were made all along to get to this point. So I think they were very proper in doing that and had a lot of forethought.
Perfect. Mr. Brendel?
I don't have anything additional, but I do agree 100% with Mr. Schwartz that we should include the EV standards for sure.
Okay.
Other than that, no comments.
Okay. It's been heard. Mr. Wishna?
So I guess and I might have missed this at some point, but I want to state it so that it can be confirmed, and then I'll ask my next question. But what we are being presented with at the moment is whether the plan meets the requirements of the redevelopment plan. Is that an accurate statement?
Whether it meets it's consistent with the township master plan, which is part of what this board did, where we designated it a redevelopment, an area of need of redevelopment, back in, 14, 15, and then we amended it again to include additional lots at a certain point in time. I mean, Mr. Hughes can give exact dates, but we've amended this many times to include additional lots.
That's understood. I guess my question really has to do with overall with this. Now I think it's the fourth or fifth redevelopment project that's been heard, and potentially as some of these are in the process of being constructed, but none are online at the moment. I know during the SACS planning board approval, there was a statement regarding the impact to the school district. I do not recall the school district impact being brought up at the final GOMS adoption of the final site plan when they came in for the last round of the amendment. If I calculate this correctly with the various the various redevelopment projects that will be coming online, with this additional 100 units, I think there's something in the range of 400 to 500 additional rental units being added. Is that an accurate statement?
Yeah. So, Mr. Wishna, I know that the township administrator has been in contact with the superintendent as well, Mayor Weber, and they review what is the anticipated additional kids, and they work with Mr. Clark, Matt Clark, for studies. So we feed them the number of units, they figure out the number of students. They are aware. I mean, I know that personally, the superintendent has brought up that, there's a lot on the Caldwell section, and I know the school board is looking at that as an issue, as a potential issue. But in this case, this is a total area that I think needs to be redeveloped. The site will really come around to it. I know the business administrator can talk through how he worked very diligently with the owner of the properties to bring down the units from, this is 100, it was 150, 170 at one point in time, and he got them much down so this to a more apt.
At any given point, was there consideration for making any of these units townhomes?
I think I can turn Mr. Basico, do you want to talk through this? You did, well, before you do, I want to thank you on behalf of the board. I know this was a very big undertaking. I know you, governing body, worked very closely at this and brought down the density and really made it look like something that we could be proud of. But can you address a little bit of that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not only did we bring the density down, but we brought the height down.
Hold on 1 sec. Do we have to swear in Mr. Basico if he's going to speak at this point in the meeting?
I think if this is going to be testimony, the answer is yes. I was just waiting to see where we're going, David. So yeah, John, I think we ought to just John, do you swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, the proceedings before the board tonight? So help you God.
Yes, I do.
Okay, just identify yourself, please.
John Basico, Township Administrator for Springfield.
Thank you.
So, Chairman Tiger, as I was saying, when this first came to us, it was 150 units, and the height was much greater than what we ended up with. Mr. Mistretta and myself and Mike Disco worked on this for 1.5 years to get the density down and the height down, because we were concerned with all the things that you've brought up. Townhomes were never brought up. We did not consider those. It was not brought up by the applicant. And Mr. Mistretta may have some additional information on that part. I do not have anything further.
I'll just add that these lots and blocks, specifically block 208, lots 6, 8, and 9, and block 209, lot 6. So 4 of the properties are incorporated into our settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing, which became part of our housing element fair share plan that was ultimately approved by the court. So, and those were all for family rental units in our plan that was adopted back in 2016 under our settlement agreement with Fair Share Housing. So long story short, the town, back in 2016 said, this is where we're going to put family rental apartment units. And we're doing exactly what we told the court that we would do, and then some. So we have a large unmet need number. This will address both a portion of our RDP, our realistic development potential, as well as our unmet needs. So it's instrumental. This project is a very instrumental part of satisfying our affordable housing conditions. But those conditions are that it's a family rental unit in an apartment building, not a townhouse, not an age-restricted project.
Okay, so essentially, the only thing that would allow us to meet our fair housing requirement would be to make all of these units rentals. Correct?
That's correct.
No way to split them out into multiple types of residential units.
Not when you consider we started, this process started with a development plan that was for 150 units and 5 stories altogether. I think going from working over the last year and a half to go from 150 down to 100 and expanding the scope of the project to make it a campus setting, get the improvements that we have now on the Springfield Manor building and all the other amenities that we've incorporated into here. And still capture 15%. Remember, there's only 85 market rate units. 15% of these, 15 of the units are affordable housing units. That's what we need to satisfy our obligations. So I being very involved in this project, I see no opportunity to even go 1 unit lower than we've already done. We have removed 1/3 of the density out of this project to get here today.
Perfect. Mr. Wishner, you good? Comfortable now?
As comfortable as I'm going to get.
Okay. Mr. Lopes?
So with respect to the conformance with the master plan, I have no comments. Looks like a great job, great project, and happy to be a part of it with the group here.
Perfect. Okay, so seeing no other questions, I'm going to take this opportunity to open this up matter to the public to speak on the Blacks Lane and Church Plan Mall redevelopment plan. Apu, is there anyone raising their hand?
Just myself, Mr. Chair. A quick question on behalf of the First Aid Squad, if you don't.
Oh, perfect. Go ahead. No, that's good.
Just an observation for the board that when we get calls to 190 Linden Avenue, which is the building on Morris Avenue at the corner, or I think it's 190 Morris, I apologize, across from the CVS there, we end up blocking a good portion of Blacks Lane when we park the ambulance to get into that building. And then similar, when we go to Springfield Manor, we end up blocking the back half of that parking lot. So the only way in and out of that back half of the parking lot towards where this new pool is going through the parking deck. Now, granted, we're not there every day or all day long, but we're going there more and more often. So I would just provide that feedback to the board.
So Apu, are you saying that the road is too narrow and needs to be looked at? Is that what you're saying?
If you're adding more people going down that road, especially if they have to get that way because it's one way, that may be.
Okay. All right. I mean, that was part of the mayor's concern a little bit as well. So, okay. Thank you for your comments. Okay. So any other members of the public that wish to speak on behalf of this presentation?
Seeing none, sir.
Seeing none, I'm going to close this to the portion and remand it back to the board. So from the board's concerns, and Glenn, you'll help me. I think the three things that Mr. Disco, I think the bank parking has already been resolved and it's already part of the plan. I think it's already included in there that a traffic study is going to be done, and I'm going to ask the board for permission to hire a traffic engineer to be on behalf of the board. The third, to look at Black's Lane. I think we'll recommend to the governing body that they look at Black's Lane as a potential for widening for the reasons of public safety as the first aid outlined to us as a comment. And then that, of course, we're going to include the new to be consistent with the state standards with electronic vehicles. Anything else that the board feels that we should be included? All we're again doing is saying it's consistent with the master plan, the building, the fences, the location of the pool, the tot lot, and all that stuff. We will resolve at site plan approval.
Sounds good.
Seeing none.
So what do you? So I'm just going to ask you what you need next.
So I'd like someone to enter a motion to authorize me to sign the resolution that was emailed out earlier today, with the additional comments that I outlined to our board attorney.
So moved.
Wait. So Mr. Jessup?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, just briefly, I just want to make sure I understand so that Glenn and I can accurately reflect in the resolution which items are recommendations that the governing body consider changing in the redevelopment plan. It sounded to me like incorporation of the requirements of the EV law into the redevelopment plan is a recommendation that the planning board wants to make so that the Township Council Committee considers revising the plan to incorporate those EV standards. It sounds to me like, and I guess we have to figure out how, but some sort of investigation or due diligence of the widening of Black's Lane is a recommendation that the planning board wants to make to have the Township Committee consider changing the redevelopment plan to reflect that. The other two items that you referenced, I thought I heard collectively that those items are already addressed in the redevelopment plan, in which case they are not recommendations that the planning board is making that the Township Committee consider revising the redevelopment plan for, because the redevelopment plan already reflects those.
That's correct. The bank parking and that the traffic light, we're looking at the timing of it, even though I'm going to ask the board to authorize hiring of a traffic engineer on our behalf, but that's already included in the redevelopment plan. So it's two things to be the EV and the widening of the road.
Thank you. Understood.
If I could just interrupt real quick, I apologize. But on page 24 of the redevelopment plan, section 3.4A1, under development requirements, parking and traffic circulation standards, it specifically states, last sentence, the traffic study shall specifically evaluate and provide recommendations for pedestrian and vehicular improvements along the entire length of Black's Lane and improvements to the intersection of Church Mall and Morris Avenue, including but not limited to the addition of a second lane on Church Mall and the modification of the timing of the traffic light signals. So it does specifically reference improvements should be studied along the entire length of Black's Lane. I don't know if that already addresses the concern.
I think that addresses the concern. I think we're going to, no matter what, hire. We've used McDonough Ray before, or Steiger. We're going to hire someone on the board to review it regardless of what they do.
Mr. Chairman, I agree, but I think what Mike is saying is that as a result of it being on page 24, that there probably is no reason to do that amendment. And it sounds like the only amendment then that we're actually doing is the electric charge.
Okay.
Yes, that sounds right.
Okay, that's perfect. All right, so if anyone has any other concerns, Mr. Barnett is looking to make a motion.
I already moved it. So moved, David Barnett.
Second.
And I'll second.
Do we have a roll call?
Mr. Barnett,
Yes to approve.
Mr. Schwartz,
Yes to approve.
Mr. Weber, Mayor Weber,
Yes, to approve.
Mr. Lawfer,
Yes.
Mr. Brendel,
Yes.
Mr. Lopes,
Yes to approve.
Mr. Wishna,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kessel,
Yes.
and Chair Tiger.
I'll say yes, but I again want to thank Mr. Mistretta, Mr. Basiglico, Mr. Disco, the tremendous effort that they put in, Mr. Jessup and Mr. Hughes and all our professionals. Looks like a great plan. Hopefully we can get this developed very, very soon. So thank you for coming. We'll sign the resolution, make sure that it has it for the Township Committee. Having no other business, let me open this matter up, open up to the public. Any other applicant, anything they would like to speak about anything before this board or anything whatsoever?
Seeing none.
Seeing none, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, everyone. See you next month. Thank you, guys. Good Thanksgiving.